Now, we might draw the debate to a close right here. I could happily concede that anybody who wishes to entertain the fantasy that an intelligent designer or intelligent designers from another galaxy or another dimension fiddled with our evolutionary prehistory, or salted Earth with life forms, or even arranged for the constants of physics to take on their particular local values, will find their fantasy consistent with contemporary evolutionary biology. So I could just simply concede that point to Alvin at this point. There's not a shred of evidence for any such fantasy, but it's a free country, and as Alvin says in one point, it is within the rights of a believing theist to go on believing that a personal and intelligent creator played a role. It's a free country, but it might be harmless, and it might be harmless enough to keep such fairy tales alive, but in general I think it is wise of us not to respect such frivolities, since they can in fact do serious damage to the epistemological fabric of our society. For instance, they might mislead deluded people into basing policy on them. For instance, by offering public sacrifices to those imagined intelligent designers in hopes of enticing them to return and repair our damaged planet. Or to take two entirely real and utterly deplorable examples, they might mislead deluded people into dismissing environmental concerns since the end times are nigh. But let me go back and should we tolerate astrology? We should tolerate it, but we shouldn't respect it. I think astrology, the ambient acceptance of astrology actually has a malign effect on the epistemological fabric of society, and we shouldn't just button our lips and be silent about it. We should say, this is irrational, this is ungrounded, this is, shame on you. You should know better than that. Or, how about the people that, the conspiracy theorists that say that the moon landing never happened? Well, I'm sure that claim is perfectly consistent with everything we know in science in a certain way, as a paranoid claim. But I think it does not deserve respect. It does not, and it certainly doesn't deserve, for instance, to be taught in the schools. And then, raising the ante terribly, Holocaust deniers. That's another case of fantasies that aren't frivolous. There's another fantasy that isn't frivolous. And another one, which was all over the internet shortly before the election, is probably still there. And it seems to me that the fantasy that Obama is the Antichrist is one of the most pernicious and dangerous irrationalities on the planet, and it is everybody's job to say so. Or consider this case. This is Pervez Kambash, who was sentenced to execution for blasphemy in Afghanistan. Not in the Taliban-controlled Afghanistan, but in post-war Afghanistan. His sentence has been commuted to 20 years in prison. Not good enough. So I don't think that we should simply say, okay, it's within our rights, it's within your rights to maintain these views. They are not inconsistent with what we know from modern science. I think we have a right to hold people to a higher standard. In any case, I want to consider whether Plantinga's particular version, the theistic Christian version, is in any better position than these other fantasies that I've mentioned. And just to give an example, I'm going to create my own Plantinga-inspired version of guided natural selection. Superman, son of Jor-El, flew from the planet Krypton about 530 million years ago and ignited the Cambrian explosion, made famous in Steve Gould's book, Wonderful Life. Well, now, why did he do this? Well, he wanted to create a sort of plaything, a world to play with, a sort of giant Ken and Barbie world for himself. And so he arrived 530 million years ago, and he tweaked the DNA of of the fauna that lived at that time in just the right way, so that vertebrates and eventually mammals and eventually us would arrive on the scene. Now, here I simply put Superman in for Plantinga in this quote. Superman could have caused the right mutations to arise at the right time. He could have preserved populations from perils of various sorts and so on. In this way, by orchestrating the course of evolution, he could have ensured that there come to be creatures of the kind he intends. Yeah? That's consistent with evolutionary theory. There's no doubt about it. There's no doubt about it. That's consistent. And I'm even going to propose some evidence. Here's the evidence that would actually convince me that this was true. We go up to the Burgess Shale in Canada, where the Burgess Shale fauna were found that really inspired Gould's book, and we get some dynamite, and we do a little blasting, and we find at the bottom of this pit, looking at shale that has not been seen by anybody for 530 million years, we discover not the Angel Moroni's golden plates, but Jor-El's golden plates. And what is on them turns out to be deciphered correctly as how to get the various gene duplications to occur so that the Burgess Shale fauna would multiply and we get the Cambrian explosion. Or another thing could happen. Allah could appear and say, I've been intervening in evolution for billions of years on this little planet. Would Plantinga say, I told you so? I wonder. That brings me to the end of my first point. I accept that he's right, that current evolutionary theory is consistent with these hypotheses, but I don't see that his has anything more going for it than my Superman one. I'd like to hear what it is that's so. Now, he's also right, and I'm being very short about this, that it is no part of current evolutionary theory to say that mutations are random, in the sense implying that they are implying that they are uncaused, that they are said to be caused by cosmic rays, for example, still less that they occur just by chance. Now, this is indeed often misunderstood. Some years ago, in Elbow Room, I pointed out that even so great an evolutionary biologist as Jacques Monod could get this wrong. And in his book, Chance and Necessity, he says that evolution would not occur in, as he says, Laplace's world, from which chance is excluded by definition. He seemed to think that indeterministic physics was a requirement for evolution to occur. It's just not. That's not the case. And so Alvin is right about that. Evolution can occur just fine in deterministic worlds, as thousands of deterministic computer models of evolution demonstrate on a daily basis. They're all deterministic. They rely on pseudo-random number generators as the source of their so-called random mutations. So indeterminism is indeed a red herring, both for evolution and for free will, as I've argued for a long time. So now we get to number 3. Evolutionary biology by itself doesn't imply the denial of divine design. This is also true, but in its own special way, which I will illustrate with a parallel story. Fred, the nasty art critic, has published a scathing review of an exhibit of Tom's art, and is found dead in his apartment the next day, his head bashed in by one of Tom's sculptures, which lies soaked in blood beside the corpse, with a published review draped over Fred's body. Murder most foul, it appears. But at Tom's trial, the defense is impressive.